Our guest today on this special interview episode of the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine is an industry veteran of the toy industry, the electronic game industry, and the video game industry. He has seen the evolution of the market from the very beginning. He's seen the crashes, and he is still looking for innovations everywhere he can today. Welcome to the show, Tom Dusenberry. To get us started, where does your career start? What is your educational background? How do you get into the toy industry?
Carl, I was born and raised in Des Moines, Iowa, which is in the Midwest of the United States. And when I was 18 years old, I was kind of a lost kid and needed to find a job. And I found a job at Parker Brother Games on the loading dock. So that's where I really began my career. And then 22 years later, I was the head of the company. So I spent my first 3 years in Des Moines and then transferred to the East Coast, or Salem, Massachusetts specifically, and then continued my journey in the game business.
Wow. So was Parker Brothers just a convenient job at the time, or were you actually interested in the product range that they were producing at the time?
I was always known as a boy who loved to play games. So I was either playing games, including poker and Monopoly and all those types of things, as well as the fact that I was always creating new games for my friends to play. So, I definitely had an eye for that. And one of my friends' mother was working at Parker Brothers, and she liked me. And so when this job opportunity came available, she knew I liked games and asked me if I would be interested. So that's really what the transfer was. And what I found interesting was that, why did I go to Parker Brothers? And it was really the beginning of the boom era from a games point of view. And people laugh at me about this, but it was really the first platform change that took place in the game industry, because we were transitioning from cardboard and two-dimensional board games to plastic. And that plastic was that new dimension that came into the game industry and really created a lot of new growth opportunities.
Gotcha. So how do you go from working in the loading dock to other areas of the company? What does the transition at that time look like inside of a company like Parker Brothers?
I found that the Parker Brothers was like a land of opportunity. And I found that the harder I worked, the more opportunity I could get for myself. And I also found that it was really important to be strategic. And during that period of time, we transitioned from being a family-owned company to being owned by General Mills and then being owned by several other companies. And each time the company transitioned, I transitioned as well. So I went from like a manufacturing background to going into sales, going into marketing, and then ultimately going into product development. And those were the qualifications I needed then to ultimately be the CEO of the company.
Gotcha. And so that transition, so you make it up to the CEO, but before that, what were some of the product lines or types of products that you worked on, both from a marketing and maybe even from a design? Were you also doing any design work or supervising design?
Yes, later on in my career, I did a lot of that type of supervision. At the beginning, like I said, it was all about plastics. And what we were really paying attention to was this huge hit called Instant Insanity. And what it was a series of 4 different blocks that you tried to, and they were all colored on the different sides, and you needed to coordinate all those colors together. And then when we transferred, the biggest transition that took place for the company was the fact that we moved into electronics. So on our second effort, we hit this handheld game called Merlin. And Merlin really transformed the toy and game industry from a point of view that everything up to that point had been really under $5 type merchandise. And all of a sudden, Merlin came along and it was a $20 item. And it really opened up the entire game industry from a point of view that all of a sudden there were new price points that you could go after and more sophisticated, more fun games that you could bring to the marketplace as well.
And Merlin's an interesting product. What was your position at the company at the time that product was introduced, and what were your responsibilities?
I was a production coordinator. So my job was to work with the different subcomponent companies to be able to get the parts to come in so that we could assemble it properly.
And that must have been interesting. Now, was it I mean, nowadays, obviously, we talk about global supply chains and so forth. What did the supply chain for the electronic components for an innovative product like that look like at that time?
Well, I think that we made a really smart decision, and that we knew about plastic and we knew about cardboard, but we really didn't know about electronics. So we partnered with the biggest and the best, Texas Instruments, and they provided us a complete printed circuit board that we just assembled into the Merlin product. And that proved to be the big success that we had because they knew what they were doing and they could provide us what we needed to get to the market.
Definitely a smart choice instead of trying to go it yourselves at that point. And then you've got the product. Obviously, you just mentioned with the price points. What was the reception of the toy retailers to that introduction? Did they embrace it at first? Was there reluctance? How did that transition to new price points work?
It was also during the period when Toys R Us was coming along, and Toys R Us was being aggressive in the marketplace. So they were embracing it because it was a new reason to bring consumers into their store. But Sears at this time was still really big, and they got behind it as well. And so it seemed to me like there was a overall embracing of electronics from a game point of view. And that was really the forerunner to then Atari that came along that really made the entire market explode.
Gotcha. And so you mentioned Sears and Toys R Us. Obviously, Toys R Us, a juggernaut as far as toy retail is concerned. But my understanding, especially in the early 70s, the primary outlets for toys were still relatively small mom and pop or smaller local or regional chains. And please correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Well, that's 100% accurate. I transitioned out of manufacturing and into sales. And one of the big journeys that I took was the fact that we would take an order as small as like $10. So if you were a retailer and wanted to buy Rook cards down in the South, we would sell you 3 packs and you could do that. And what we did was that we found that we needed to get a distributor network to take care of a lot of those smaller mom and pop stores. So we consolidated our customer base from like 5,000 to 500 just so that we could, manage our business better. And that was a big part of the business at that point. And I think the reason for that was the fact that we were getting more high-priced products, and we needed a distributor to kind of be able to balance inventory on all those really small mom-and-pop type stores.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're coordinating production of a product like Merlin, and did you move from there into sales, or was the sales before the product management position?
Well, actually, after with the project management system, I actually transferred into marketing, and I was the new product coordinator. And it was a brand new position within Parker Brothers, but my job was to coordinate between development, marketing, sales, and production to make all the schedules happen. And it uniquely put me in a very strong position of power across the company because I knew what was happening in all the different parts of the company. And that really, was an interesting ride from my point of view because we were able to really understand the process from all the different points of view and how they had to come together. And then from that, I transferred to being an assistant product manager, where I was responsible for the electronic business and also the Nerf business. So it was, just an assignment that I had, and, I was, moving through the organization at that stage.
Gotcha. And so at this point, research and development of new product, especially in the electronics area, was that primarily being done in-house, or was that something where outside suppliers were the driving force of new product?
The 100% of the design and development was done internally. And we hired really smart people out of MIT and out of the big technology companies to really help us with that. And the sophistication was not only in electronics, but it was also in plastics because it had to encase those electronics properly. So, we really did have a great team of internal type development people. But from a manufacturing point of view, we made one mistake and thought that we could build those PC boards by ourselves and had a huge disaster. And we learned a lesson, and that is partner with people that are the best in the industry. And we continued that for years to come.
Gotcha. So the success of the handheld electronics, and you already pointed out Atari hits big, making the exchangeable cartridge market something. What was the internal thinking at Parker Brothers when that transition happens? Are you guys thinking, well, maybe we should get into that business? How, and so forth? And what was the strategic planning concerning the future of handheld electronics?
So handheld electronics were continuing to do well. And so, we had like an electronic pool game, we had Reflex, we had, multiple products, but they were all pretty much within the genre of plastic and electronics put together. And at this stage, we are now owned by General Mills. And General Mills is a very massive, consumer product company. And they had made a big investment in toys and games because they bought Kenner and they also bought Parker Brothers. And so from their point of view, if we're going to do this, let's do it with big impact. And that was really the genesis of saying, why don't we go after the Atari business? But the whole attitude was, if we're going to go after the Atari business, we need to own the Atari business from a game point of view. And that was really our perspective. So from the very beginning, we really had the best licenses, we had the best product, and we had the best distribution to make all of that happen. And when Atari was at its absolute peak, people don't remember this, but 7 of the top 10 games were Parker Brother games. Frogger, Q*bert, and Popeye were number 1, 3, and 5 in the marketplace. We also had Star Wars. I mean, we just had a line that was second to none of product that was in the market. And Kurt, what was amazing was what was amazing was the fact that that business was like a rocket ship, and it went from like $0 to $200 million. And it was also like a rocket ship coming down. And over an 18-month period of time, I built a national sales organization where we had 57 people that were working on selling Atari product. And over a 6-week period of time, I fired 53 of those 57 people. So, I mean, it was an amazing experience, both up and down.
And there's a lot to unpack there. And I can imagine this must have been an interesting time, to say the least. You mentioned a couple of titles there, Frogger, Popeye. Now, these, and obviously the Star Wars license, I guess, got to talk a little bit. Did that come in together with the Kenner synergy, or was that a separately negotiated license?
No, we were tight with Kenner. And, Kenner was offering a toy and game solution. And so, George Lucas, he wanted to see this new, interactive experience happen as well. So he was very very positive for it, and wanted to see it happen and wanted to make sure that we had a product that was, worthy of the market.
Gotcha. And the licensing of arcade conversions from different companies. Popeye came from Nintendo. Frogger, believe in the North American license may have been Sega, but I could be wrong on that. Konami. Okay. And so the question then is, what were negotiations for acquisitions of those kind of titles like at that point?
Very similar to toy terms. So there would be an advance, and there would be a licensing fee, and that was pretty much the extent of it.
Okay. And were there any considerations at the time to move into computer software, or were you guys limiting yourselves to the console business?
No, we took those products across every single interactive format. So whether it was the Atari 400, 800, whether it was the TRS-80, the IBM, I don't remember what the name was at the point, but their basic title.
The XT, yeah.
Yeah, so I think we were across between 7 and 10 different formats.
Okay, so obviously the crash happens. All of this comes tumbling down. The question really is, did that match up with any kind of projections that you guys had, or was there any inkling that was coming? And how did you find out that it had crashed?
Well, the bottom truly fell out of the market, and it fell out of the market truly fast. There was a product called ET that came into the market, and there were so many products that were built, it just completely flooded the market. And so I don't think anybody anticipated the crash nearly as severe as it was. And so to give you an example, here I am dealing with this up-and-coming company, Toys R Us, and they're loaded with all of our product. So I go to my management and I said, we got to clean them out because we're going to do business with them in the future. So I came up with this idea, Carl, that I said, why don't we do this? We'll offer a product for $9.99 at retail, and we'll give them a $10 off coupon. So basically, they'll get it for free. And we did all of our analysis. We went outside to have experts give us the analysis of what it should cost, and we estimated that program would cost us $600,000. We implemented that program, and when it was all said and done, it cost over $6 million.
Whoa.
But the good news was that might have been the cheapest thing that happened for us because we cleared out everything, and that allowed us to go on with Toys R Us with other business. Whereas other companies were just stuck with endless types of software. It took years to get through.
Gotcha. And just for the layman to understand what you mean by being able to keep doing business with Toys R Us, obviously you're not just producing video games at this point. You still have a big lineup of board games and other products. So explain how the toy business would have been affected had you not done that.
Well, what Toys R Us would have done is they would have looked at that inventory as distressed cash, right? Because they have to pay for it. And so because you go in with the next year's line and you say, I'd like you to buy all these things, and they say, well, I really can't because you don't have the credit to be able to allow me to be able to bring that into the store. And until we clear up this mess, I'm not really willing to talk with you about your new product. And so, from a salesman's point of view, he's always got to clean up kind of like last year's messes so that he can get ready to sell whatever the new stuff is. And, that you always hear the term, a loaded retailer is a loyal retailer. And that is because, when they have a lot of your inventory, they want to work with you to try to help them get out of that so that they can get on with their business as well.
Gotcha. Okay. And so once that first round of the console business dies, what is Parker Brothers' focus in relationship to electronic or video gaming? Do you continue to produce games for computer formats? Do you decide to get out of the business altogether? What becomes the internal strategy?
The company decided to get out of the video game business altogether, and it was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so that was the goal, and that was what the mission was. And a big outcome of this was that General Mills, which is a company that they own Cheerios and they own these other mega brands, are used to slow, steady growth. And here comes along Kenner and Parker, and we have big hits and big valleys, right? And the outcome of this was that General Mills divested of their toy business, and so Kenner and Parker went off on our own. And what happened was that we were actually split off into our own company. We were then named Kenner Parker Toys, and we were an independent, New York Stock Exchange type company. And so that's where, all of a sudden, everything changed because we didn't have the charter of General Mills over us. And I started to do licensing at that point. So I would out-license Monopoly and other products to products that were up and coming, which was primarily Nintendo and Sega at that point. Mm-hmm. But then after about an 18-month period of time, Kenner Parker Toys was sold to Tonka. And Tonka actually had the North American rights to Sega. And so from a Parker Brother point of view, I developed multiple Sega games for the Sega Genesis system because of my partnership now with Tonka.
Gotcha. So this is still the period when Tonka has the Master System distribution rights.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. And what was your official role at Kenner Parker at this point?
At Kenner Parker, I'm the head of alternate sales and sale promotion type opportunities.
Okay, and this whole idea of the licensing, licensing of the intellectual properties and the branding, how big of a business was that for a company like Kenner Parker at that point?
Not very big. Out licensing, small.
Okay, it's before the days of people walking around with a Monopoly Guy T-shirt type of thing.
Right. Well, yeah, and that's actually an important point because Monopoly was always a game up until Hasbro Interactive came along and created, all these different franchise type opportunities, and then it changed completely. And now it's a huge brand. It's like a lifestyle brand.
That's true. That's true. Okay, so you now have this access to the Sega system, which is a more direct access than you would have had to the Atari system in the first wave. How did that change the development of product? Or
we were very cautious, and I think the two lead titles we were in the world was Carmen Sandiego and King's Quest. So we didn't even put our own properties into the Sega system. But with that, we supported them, and I liked those products, and we used good developers to make it happen, and it was worthy of the system at the time.
Gotcha.
But compared to the Atari days, when we went out, 7 out of the top 10, we probably had 50 products in the marketplace. We've now got 2 that are, just like, second tier type licenses at that point.
And were you also developing any or licensing any of the properties for use on the NES at that point?
No.
Or no? Okay.
We actually out-licensed Monopoly to Nintendo.
Gotcha. Now, obviously, the relationship between Sega and Tonka ends, I believe, in 88 or 89, if memory serves me right.
Yeah.
May have been, it was somewhere around there. What does that change your focus? Is there a new any impetus to do more on the gaming front after that relationship ends?
I was I loved electronics, as you're hearing, and I always like to stay in it. So I was finding other product to bring to the marketplace, either that was through a partnership or some type of co-op that would mitigate our risk, but allow Parker Brothers to stay in the game one way or another.
Okay, and what were some of those products that were?
So, like we did at the time, snowboarding was becoming very popular. So we did a game called Heavy Shredding, which was a snowboarding type game. And my company wouldn't support me from a capital point of view. So I went to Reebok, and they were starting this new franchise called the Pump Shoe. So you put your shoe on, you pump this little button, and it tightens it up around your foot. And so then it became the Heavy Shredding Pump game, and Reebok paid for the bulk of that R&D to get that product to the marketplace.
Okay, cool. And was that an handheld electronic? Was that a game cartridge?
No, that was a Super NES.
Okay, Super NES game. So at this point, going into the 16-bit era, and is it still Kenner Parker by that point, or was it already renamed?
It's it's Kenner Parker now. It's probably becoming Tonka.
Tonka, okay.
And Kenner Parker are subsidiaries of Tonka.
Okay. And so still there's a certain hesitation about getting back into the games business. When does that change? When does the company, or what happens to Tonka at that point? What's the next big change?
Tonka was probably the worst run company in the world, and it way overcommitted to buying Kenner Parker and never could get out from underneath the debt that it created for itself. So to make a long story short, in 1991, Hasbro bought the Tonka company, and that got Kenner and Parker into the Hasbro family.
Okay. And what was Hasbro's strategy with those new companies that it had purchased?
To benefit from the great brands that the companies were delivering.
And so what were some of the projects that you were put on at that point, or what was your function in this new configuration? Well,
when I was with the Tonka part of the business, I think I was the director of marketing services and international. So I ran just about, all the advertising, all the research, everything in support of the brands at that point. And then I developed the international strategy for the company, and I executed that. And when Parker Brothers was purchased by Hasbro, it was one of those opportunities for me to reinvent myself. And the way I looked at the marketplace was that there was a new president in place, a new head of marketing in place, and from an R&D point of view, there was really nobody that was established there. And I always liked innovation and was really kind of enamored by that business. And so I took a kind of a career risk, and I left marketing and went into R&D and became the head of inventor relations for Parker Brothers. And that really then my career skyrocketed from that point of view, because that's where my innovation really flourished, and I was able to establish Hasbro Interactive and a lot of other successes out of that innovation type mode that I was in.
Okay, and definitely need to talk about Hasbro Interactive, but in addition to Hasbro Interactive before that, what were some of the other products or innovations that you were bringing to the table around that time?
Well, I think the one thing that we skipped over during this whole thing was the Nerf experience.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yes.
And, Nerf was very interesting from a point of view that most people don't remember that Parker Brothers created Nerf and established it. And today, it's $1 billion business. So, I mean, it's a huge business. But back when I was doing electronics, we were also doing Nerf. And it was kind of an alternate to the board game business as well, which was what the core business was. And, so Nerf was brought in, and it was, the positioning was it was safe, soft, fun. So the whole idea was you could play it indoors, and, it could bounce off of things and it wouldn't hurt your furniture. And, it was a great little line. The problem was it was just a great little line, and it was kind of stuck on being inside. And so, people laugh at it now, but, we made a huge strategic decision to take Nerf outside with the Nerf football and, risk the brand, so to speak, to see if that could happen. And, the business increased tenfold just by going outside when you had a football and you had a soccer ball and all those types of things. And so, that became a really significant growth business. And then about 5 or 6 years later, that's when the Blast-A-Ball came in, and that's when the forced air was created that created the impulsion that is happening now. And, the whole Nerf line is nothing but shooters at this stage. But those were huge risks back at the time to be able to make transitions for that brand.
Gotcha. And as somebody who grew up around that, I do remember that transition. I remember when the first Nerf footballs started showing up in the early 80s, and I do remember having one. Much easier on the fingers than a real football, that's for darn sure.
That was our slogan. A little soccer so you can play a little harder.
Oh, that is a great line, actually. Okay, so you've... yes, and now you've got Hasbro. Obviously, Hasbro also has its own complement of properties. And so you said head of inventor relations, was that the title? Now, what did that entail?
My job was to go around the world and to find new games to bring to Parker Brothers to bring to the marketplace.
Gotcha. Now, are you primarily thinking of board games at this point, or is your mandate a little bit wider than that?
I'm thinking about finding hot, cool, new stuff that is primarily driven by games, one way or another. But that's what I'm really going after. What happened during that period of time was that there was changes going on. The company was bought by Hasbro, and so those executives I talked about exited. Where they exited to were to our competition. So, it used to be like Parker Brothers and Milton Bradley were, arch rivals. Well, then the top executive from Parker Brothers ends up over at Mattel. So now all of a sudden Mattel becomes like a hot spot, and then the number 2 guy goes over to Tyco. And so he takes all of his relationships as well. So I come into this business kind of like, who in the hell is Tom Dusenberry? He's a marketing guy, and why is he doing product stuff? And with that, that's kind of how I was treated by the established inventors. So I decided to do a scorched earth strategy. And I said, there's got to be new young talent that's out there. I'll find them, and I'll let them create the new stuff in the future. And that turned out to be a really good move. And so Dan Klissner, David Hoyt, many inventors today really started because of that scorched earth strategy. And what happened was that in 93, 94, and 95, Parker Brothers delivered 6, 8, and 9 of the top new products into the marketplace. And so, our inventor relations business and our relationship with the inventors were sky high during that period of time.
What were some of the big highlight products from that era?
Well, Catchphrase came out of that era, and it's still, one of the top games today. Goofy Golf was actually quite successful. Ellie Fun, that was a 20-year run for a product. So a lot of those types of games. And then we did a lot of extensions where instead of just doing Batman, 2D type board game, we actually went out and worked with an inventor to come up with a Batman scenario type game. And it was popular with the kids.
Very cool. And you also mentioned at the same time we have the Hasbro Interactive project. Or is this slightly afterwards? Or does that
from 91 to 95, I was the inventor relations guy. Okay. And then I founded and created Hasbro Interactive in 95, and that ran to 2001.
Okay. And what was the impetus to get back into software?
As the inventor relations guy, although we had some successes in the marketplace, I was bringing a lot of new innovation to the company and presenting it and getting laughed out of the room for who would do this, who would waste our time with this kind of stuff, such as Magic the Gathering and other types of products. And ultimately, they would turn out to be successful. And so the chairman and the CEO of Hasbro, Alan Hassenfeld, was noticing that as well because he was watching me getting laughed out of the room all the time, and yet these things would turn out to be successes by other people. And so from that, in 1995, Alan went to my boss and said, I'd like to work directly with Tom and see if we can find innovation that, we can get the whole company to get behind. And my boss said, yeah, I think that's a good idea. Why don't you do that? So my charter was to come back to Alan and to have a list of things that we should go after from a Hasbro point of view. And after a 6-week analysis, I came back with one word, and that was we should pursue the internet. And Alan said, what's the internet? And from that created Hasbro Interactive, where we built PC games and video games, and then ultimately built Games.com, which was the original vision for Hasbro Interactive that created the online game business.
Okay, so it really comes out of the whole online idea. Now, what did you see as the potential of online at that early stage?
Interactivity. What happened was that Bill Gates came out with Microsoft Windows 95, and multimedia was all of a sudden now available. And to me, I just said, that graphic presentation, those visualizations will make it so much more fun. And so that to me was what I was so excited about. But I also knew that we would get laughed out of the market if we didn't do it with some type of panache. And so at the time, probably the leading game developer in the world was Westwood Studios out of Las Vegas. And so we reached out to Westwood Studios, and Brett Sperry and Lewis Castle, who were the two owners, really resonated with us, and me in particular. And I asked them to use their creative brilliance from an interactive point of view to do something special with Monopoly. And so Monopoly was really the first product that came out, and it had Westwood Studios, right on the front of the package. And it was spectacular. It truly was. They delivered everything that we asked them to do, and the imagination of what you could do with a board game from an interactive point of view was somewhat established. And so from that, that all of a sudden created wow, that we can do this with other products as well. And so I established a strategy right up front, and it was three-pronged that got executed perfectly, and that is extend Hasbro brands, use the leverage of Hasbro's licensing capability to get great licenses, and always focus on original content, because that's where the new asset and the new value will be created. So from that, we delivered against all of those things, and Roller Coaster Tycoon was the #1 PC game for 2 years in a row, which is unheard of, and that was the original content that we brought to the market.
Gotcha. Obviously, you had the previous experience of having seen how the games industry worked the first time around. What lessons from that first go-around did you apply to the second go-around, if any?
Focus on fun. The enduring, lasting quality of any product is the fun experience. Mm-hmm. And so, you're going to worry about packaging, you're going to worry about a lot of other things, but focus on fun, because that's what's going to be your true value asset ultimately.
Gotcha. Now, you mentioned Westwood Studios. Were your products exclusively developed by outside studios under contract, or was there any internal development being developed?
We primarily used outside resources until I started buying a bunch of companies. So like when I bought Spectrum, Holobyte, Microprose, studios came with them. And so we kept them and kept those franchises going with whatever they were developing. So at the end, it was a mix of both internal development capability and external development capability.
Gotcha. And that company, because at that point it was one company, very interesting. Why were they interesting to you, and how did that purchase come about?
Which one was that?
Spectrum Holobyte / Microprose.
The Spectrum Holobyte had purchased Microprose, so it was one company. And so Spectrum Holobyte took the Microprose name. And I was on the hunt for high-quality content, and Civilization was on the top of my list. And to get an opportunity to get Civilization and to get an opportunity to work with Sid Meier was like, wow, this would be really great. And then also what came with the franchise was Gilman Louie. Gilman was the Spectrum Holobyte guy, and he was a child genius, and he's one of the brightest men I've ever met in my life. And he synergistically, was kind of aligned with what I was trying to make happen as well. And he was finishing off Falcon 4.0, which was a huge product at the time that was very meaningful to us. So those were kind of the driving factors behind trying to make that happen. And then the other factor, of course, was that they were getting me into genres that I wasn't in, and that is all of a sudden I had Civilization and that whole marketplace, and all of a sudden I had simulation with Railroad Tycoon, and also with Falcon 4.0. So those were big markets that I was looking to penetrate, with more pizzazz as we went forward.
Excellent. And two questions come out of that for me. First off, what was it like to diversify your market? Did this force you into different retail outlets than you would have been otherwise? And did that meld well with the existing Hasbro distribution infrastructure?
We became somewhat diverse at that point. And so I split the company into 3 divisions. And so we had like a family and children's business, and then we had the Microprose business, and then we had the Atari business. So Atari was retro. Microprose was more like strategy, role-play fantasy type games. And so those were the 3 different genres. And each of them had to work differently from a point of view that their trade terms were different. So like in the family and children's business, if you sold 100 units, you could get 100 units worth of money back because ultimately they would just all sell. Whereas in the Microprose business, you'd sell 100 units, but you would reserve up to 50% thinking it may come back to you.
Wow.
Yeah, because of the fact that, everything was guaranteed sale. So you had to protect against that. So the whole way you had to look at your business was completely different. And so we divided our business into those, understanding what the trade terms would be.
Now, and that's purely due to different retail outlets selling the product, or was that just because of the nature of the product?
It was once my company got really big, it became a big issue from a Hasbro point of view because they liked very standard trade terms, and in the software business, particularly at that time, because of the educational software business, it was all guaranteed sale. And what that meant was that no matter how you put into retail, if they didn't sell whatever was left over, you owned it, and they didn't have to pay for it. And that was onerous from a toy company point of view, but that's just the way the electronic business worked. And so you had to deal with that from a point of view of understanding how you did your accounting to make sure that you didn't put 100 units in, account that and plan for it, and then all of a sudden find out that you have shortfalls because you're getting all these returns.
Gotcha. Okay. And so why was there such a big difference between the products sold for Microprose and the family product?
The family product is endearing long-term product. So if with your daughter as an example, if she plays Monopoly, it will be the same Monopoly that my kid probably played with, or pretty close to it. Whereas, like with Falcon 4.0, we knew that there was a market for somewhere between 150 and 250,000 people. So in the trade, the way we did it was that we ended up selling 300,000 units in because we wanted to capture all of that. And it was amazing because it was pent-up demand, and we sold like 240,000 pieces in the first 3 weeks. And then after 9 weeks, we had sold 250,000 pieces. So it was over. Everybody that had it wanted it. So what was ever left, they just said it's no good for us anymore. And even if we did a discount, there's just no market for it. So it needed to come back.
Gotcha. Okay. Sorry, these are the kind of interesting insights that you don't normally see as a consumer on the outside of it. So you mentioned that you wanted to work with somebody like Sid Meier. That begs the question, what was your market analysis like? How closely did you follow what was going on in the market? You mentioned that you always played games. Were you gaming yourself personally, or was this purely keeping track of what was going on in the market?
I always play games. I love games, so I don't have an issue with that. But I'm a trend guy too, and I was trying to grow my business, and I knew that how many family and children games can you do? You already owned Nintendo, you owned Nickelodeon, you already had Disney, you already had all the Hasbro stuff. It was like, okay, where else can I go with this type of stuff? And so that was a big part of it. Okay.
And when so you have Microprose, you have Atari, which I believe was GT Interactive before that, and Infogram before that. You have all of this together. The internet strategy, once you're producing these big entertainment products, how does the internet strategy come into that? How did that get integrated?
The company was always built on wanting to do an internet business, and but we were way too early for our time. So we connected with some very young, very, very talented people at MIT that were building an internet game capability and infrastructure. And so I partnered with them initially to try to get started. And I realized that the only way we were really going to be successful is if I moved this business to California, because that's where the resources really were. And it was separate from the big company that was making all the revenues and was going to, didn't have to absorb all that type of stuff. So I took the Spectrum Holobyte studio that was in San Francisco, and I transferred that to games.com. And then I took the most creative, most talented, most trusted designer I had. His name is Chris Down, and asked him to move to San Francisco and head up the game development. And so Chris did that. And so from that, we were on our own. We had, some very, very high-end engineers with a really creative guy that was beginning to build product based upon the limitations of what we could do from a latency point of view, and, and all the other issues that we were dealing with at that time.
Gotcha. And what was the timeline that you were planning for with this project? I mean, were you hoping to be able to turn a product around in 6 months, get the platform up and running? How much wiggle room did you have with this?
When we greenlit the project to when we got to the marketplace, it was less than 2 years. But as you know, everything was test and repeat. And so we got to the marketplace, and then we were updating and upgrading all the time.
Gotcha. And was there any pressure from Hasbro to focus on licensing the properties that it owned outside the company for immediate revenue, as opposed to keeping them in-house for this internal project?
Zero. Hasbro trusted us and wanted us to do what was best for the business. From Hasbro's point of view, we were like a gold mine, because during that time it was the internet bubble, and our business plan alone was worth so much money, it was unbelievable. And so from their point of view, it was, go Tom go, because, this could be, the mother lode that we're all looking for.
Gotcha. And so what was the reality of revenue generation and income generation from the Games.com project?
Well, it was hard for Hasbro to understand, because we didn't make any money from a point of view of subscription. Everything was advertising driven. And, that's just such a different model than what a consumer product company is used to. But we were able to, get, consumer product companies that wanted to come to support us. And a lot of times what we found is that we would have to do like Gaming type things, so that we would embed their brands into what our games would be. Ah,
okay. So product placement, like you would see in a movie.
And making that part of the creative process. So that's so yeah. I mean, and the revenue expectations, there wasn't high demand to make this a really fast growth business. There was high demand to be able to put many resources behind it to continue to build the plan, because of the heat of the internet at the time.
Gotcha. And was there an understanding that this was going to be a bubble, or was that visible internally to you guys, at least from the stock standpoint?
No. I mean, nobody saw that the internet collapsed the way it did.
Gotcha. I guess walk me through the ups and downs, the highs and lows of that project.
The highs were innovation and creativity, and creating something that had never been done before. The lows were, I wasn't really proud of the games that were coming out, because there were so many limitations from a technology point of view. I would have loved to have seen Hasbro ended up, selling the business. So, it never really finished what it was doing. And I would have loved to have seen what would have happened to it ultimately if it would have stayed the course.
Gotcha. What were some of the goals that you never got to implement?
Putting sport products into the market, creating higher resolution for, gameplay experiences, creating a subscription model.
Gotcha. And yeah, that would have, we saw it just a few years later with the MMOs and so forth, where a subscription model became a standard for quite a while.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, and so what happens when the decision is made to sell the business? Well, or how did that decision get made?
It was kind of a unique story. I was with Hasbro and for that extended period of time, and in February of 2000, Hasbro came to me and said that they wanted to commit to me long term and sign me up for a 4-year contract. And it was a life changer. It really was. It was a wonderful contract, and it was a big commitment. And in June of that year, Hasbro came to me and said, "We can't stay in this business any longer. Would you please lead the effort and see if you can find another home for your business?" So what happened was that Hasbro had some not so successful license experiences with Star Wars and other licenses. This is the late 90s. And also was just spread too wide. I mean, they had Galoob, they had Odds on Toys, they had Kenner. They were all over the place. And so they decided that what they needed to do was to bring it all together and to go through a consolidation. And through that consolidation, I was talking earlier about trade terms. My business was kind of sticking out from a trade term point of view. And so I wanted to see I gave birth to this company, and I wanted to make sure that it got into the right hands. And so I was 1,000% committed to fulfilling what the company wanted to do. And we successfully sold the company to Infogrames. And then I exited the company because I had that great contract, and I was able to finish off at that point.
Gotcha. And so you exit, you don't stay with the company after the sale to Infogrames?
Correct.
Okay. And what do you do at that point?
I had become close with the owner of Tiger Electronics. His name was Randy Rissman. And when my company was sold, and the first day I exited, the very first phone call I got was from Randy. And Randy said, "What are you going to do now, Tom?" And I said, "I think I'm going to go into mobile games because I think it's the future." And he goes, "I'm with you." He goes, "What, can I partner with you?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And I said, "But we're going to need some money to get started." Randy wrote a check for $1 million and sent it to me. And that created Call It Entertainment, which was my very first company in the mobile area. And Randy and we were the co-founders of that business. And, that's where it started. And I went out and I got 2 licenses from Hasbro, and people were shocked to hear that they would think I would do Clue or The Game of Life or Monopoly. And I asked for Connect 4 and I asked for Simon. And they was like, "Why?" And the answer was that at the time, if you think about it, those 2 games would be conducive to the ability for handheld products to be able to be played properly. And there again, it was back to gameplay experience. And those turned out to be pretty good licenses, and they got to the marketplace.
Gotcha. Yeah, perfectly reasonable, especially with mobile devices of the time. I mean, it makes sense. I still have a variant of Connect 4 on my phone today. So does that company then turn into Dusenberry Entertainment, or is that a separate evolution?
So simultaneous to Call It Entertainment, I start Dusenberry Entertainment. And that's just like my holding company. At this stage, I've invented in-theater interactive entertainment, and I've patented that. So I need a company to put that patent into. And
Gotcha.
so this was what the primary purpose was. But as projects came along from an independent point of view, I had a holding place and could always hold that. So from my point of view, from that point up until today, Dusenberry Entertainment has always been an important part of my life, although it's come in and out from a point of view that I've done other things as well.
Gotcha. And the patent that you just referenced, could you explain what that is?
Yeah, I was really big into mobile devices at the point. And I loved movies, and I really thought that the idea would be is that you would be able to go into a movie theater, you would be able to download something and interact with the screen and have instant interaction between the movie theater audience and the movie screen itself. And so I created this technology that had it went from the projector to the internet to the mobile device, and it was a loop that allowed for that interactivity to happen.
Mm. Okay, cool. Hasn't been implemented yet, or has there been any tests of it?
I work with a company in Toronto, Canada called Time Play, and here it is 20 years later, and we're still trying to make that implementation happen.
Gotcha. And the sorry if I'm going to get the name wrong again. Call It Entertainment.
Yes, correct.
Yes. Is that still a ongoing concern, or?
No, what happened with Call It Entertainment, we went after J2ME product. And we found a company in New Hampshire called Chasma that had Brew product. So that was kind of the Verizon solution. And so after 2 years of Call It Entertainment, we consolidated and did a roll-up of Call It Entertainment into Chasma. And then I became the CEO of Chasma. And to make a long story short, what happened, that company lasted for another 2 years, and then I sold that company to a company in San Francisco called Kayak Interactive. And so now we're into our third roll-up, and the guy I sold it to was a friend of mine, and so he hired me as a assistant to the CEO, and I went out and did licensing for him. So I got the Da Vinci Code license and, got some substantial business. And then ultimately, Kayak got rolled up into Glue Interactive. So it was a 4-step process, and that Glue Interactive, that's kind of where the whole thing ended, at least from my point of view. And that was a 10-year journey that, was interesting. And then during that period of time, what also happened was that now Steve Jobs has come along with, the iPhone, and that the mobile business completely changed at that point.
Gotcha. And so when you were still in it, the iPhone was released. How did that move from were you already there when the sort of the race to the bottom and the prices in the App Store started hitting, or were you already out of the business by then?
No, it was always trying to find. It was always trying to find an audience that would buy a product, right? We did it. We did. I call it entertainment. We introduced a product with a UK cake company, and we wanted to sell the product for 99 pence, right? So we go out on the marketplace for that, and we got like 4 people to buy it, right? So then we said, well, geez, maybe the price is too high. Let's go to like 49 pence and see if it'll sell. And so we get like 20 people that'll buy it at 49 cents. So I go, heck, what the heck? Let's just make it 19 cents and see what happens. We then get like 200 people. So I said, oh man, there must not be any market. Let's just give it away for free. We give it away for free, and we have like 10,000 people that want to play it. It's like, shit, there is a market there. You just got to find the right price point for what the value is that you're giving them.
Mm.
And so,
Yeah.
That's what it all comes down to,
It's a tough business, apparently, especially nowadays with so many products coming out. Now, where are you now? Retired, semi-retired? What do you qualify yourself as? Are you still active in any projects?
Yeah, I'm totally active. I try to stay as engaged as possible. I don't really run companies anymore. But I do lots of different projects, and I try to do things that are like leading edge type projects, and I try to work with teams that I enjoy, and then I try to combine those teams with meaningful brands. So yeah, I definitely would say I'm engaged at this point, and trying to take advantage of the knowledge that I have, and I do think I'm a trend guy still, and I'm finding new opportunities all the time.
Okay, and that basically leads to sort of the big finale. Where do you see the next big trend as far as the gaming business is concerned?
Well, I think that esports can still be explosive because I think head-to-head competition is really key. So I'm excited about what that market brings. I also think that the PlayStation 5 will be kind of a revolution because of the fact that it'll be so embedded into everybody's living room. That games will go beyond just gameplay, and there'll be other types of features that'll go with it. And then I also think that what we'll probably see is a entire new market with second screen opportunities. So in the future, when you play games, there'll probably be like Nintendo has, it's got another screen there to be able to get additional information for you. And it'll be like if you're on your Sony PlayStation, you're probably getting not only your news and you're not only watching a show, but you're also probably having some type of game that's going on as well.
Gotcha. That's actually an interesting view. I never really thought about it, but you're right. Why not? An all-in-one, the multitasking generation. And working off of the different experiences that you've had in the industry. This is sort of a standard question I try to ask everybody. Throughout your career, what was the one trend or innovation that hit big that you didn't see coming? And what was the one that you thought was going to go someplace that basically never caught fire?
What did I miss? I guess massively multiplayer online games I missed because I didn't think the subscription would work. So, I guess that was one that I wish I would have paid more attention to early on. And then the one that should have taken off that didn't, I did a Nintendo product back in the late 90s called Glover. And it's got a cult following to it now. But, I think I did lousy marketing, so I kind of have to take the blame for that. But if I could have found an audience early for that, that could have been a mega hit for us.
Glover, what was that?
It was a Super NES game, and it was a character-based game. And at the time, Michael Jackson was quite popular, and his white glove was kind of what the motivation was behind this. And with that white glove, things could change, and the personality could change, and it was quite a clever game. And the design team behind Frogger was the design team that I put behind Glover as well. And I felt that they did an exceptional job, and the market didn't accept it.
Gotcha. And I do have to ask, sorry, I didn't do the follow-up at the time. You mentioned that you couldn't get the Hasbro executive team to buy into Magic the Gathering. Did you actually present it to them, and how did you hit on that product?
Well, I went to Gen Con in like 1992, and it was on my Scorched Earth strategy type thing, looking for games where other people wouldn't look. And it was amazing. I was in Wisconsin, and there was this little company that had this card game, and there was a line that was like 2 blocks long, people wanting to play it. And I didn't understand what in the heck what they were so excited about, and it was Magic the Gathering. So the second day I went, and I found a way to meet the owner of the company, Peter Atkinson, and he showed me all around and was really proud of his game, and we got to play it. And it's just like, wow, a light bulb went off. It was like, wow, this is the future, no question about it. So I was quite excited about it. And I came back to Parker Brothers, and we had a management line review. And that means that Alan Hassenfeld and all his top executives for all the company come there. And I go in and I say, I've seen something I'm so excited about that I think that this could be 5 times bigger than our entire card line. Our card line was Millborn, Pitt, Rook, these little nice, beautiful games, but small games. And it was about $2 million worth of business. So I'm saying that I think Magic the Gathering could be $10 million worth of business, just a card game. And I present it, and I lay out the 2 sides, and I show it. And those guys said, why are you wasting our time with this product? This is stupid. Nobody is going to want to play that type of game. So I get laughed out of the room, right? But I still believe in that game. And so what happened was, fast forward, I stayed in touch with Peter Atkinson and with Richard Garfield. And so in 1997, I had a great honor, and that was Richard Garfield and I were the co-inventors of the year, given this award by the inventor community. And they acknowledged that I had invented Hasbro Interactive. So I was like, wow, this is a great accomplishment, and I get to know Richard a little bit better. So then what happened was that I bought Spectrum Holobyte, and I got Gilman Louie. And Gilman was on the board of Wizards of the Coast and was close with Peter. And that suddenly gave me credibility all of a sudden with Peter and Magic the Gathering people, because I'd bought a real game company. And that began a discussion, and I got to the point I'd convinced Hasbro that we should buy this company. So we go out to buy the company, we sit down in this formal meeting, and I say, here's a price, and it was a price that had a $25 million kicker to it. So it was like, wow, these guys are really going to get rich out of this. And they flat out rejected us. And it was like, wow, this is so depressing. And the reason they rejected us was that we didn't value this new up-and-coming license called Pokemon. So about 6 weeks go by, and I'm literally losing sleep at night because I just think we have to have Magic the Gathering. We have to have Dungeons and Dragons. And I get up in the middle of the night, and I call the chief operating officer of Hasbro, Herb Baum, and I go, Herb, we've made a horrible mistake. I really think we should readdress this. And he goes, Tom, if you have that much passion, he goes, I'll keep an open mind, and let's talk about it. So I bring Peter in. Peter talks with Herb Baum, and Herb falls in love with Peter. We go back 2 weeks later with a $150 million addition and an earnout if there's upside to that. And they sold us the business, and the rest was history.
Amazing. I needed to follow up on it because I was then doing the math in my head. Okay, I know when Hasbro buys Wizards of the Coast, and then I needed to know if you were involved with that because, hardcore Dungeons and Dragons player from back in the day. So, yeah.
I was the lead guy in that, and it was we just had to make it happen, and we did.
Yeah. No, I can imagine.
It was phenomenal on 2 levels, frankly. One was that Hasbro paid back that entire acquisition in 9 months, the entire acquisition. And today, Magic's $1 billion business with its online franchise. I mean, it's beyond huge, and it's just a gold mine from a point of view of profitability.
And when you saw it originally, was the business model of the add-on cards was that a fully fleshed out business model with the packs and so forth already?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what Richard Garfield brings to the table, was the math behind it. And he had figured out those rare cards versus those common cards and what cards were in between. And then he figured out those sheets so that would all work out that way. it used to be crazy. You'd go to the store and you'd have to buy 5 or 6 packs because you only wanted one card, but you had to get that card to make your deck stronger.
Yeah, a massive, massive, massive success right there. Is there anything that I should have asked you about that I didn't?
Just 2 quick things. From after the video game business, the mobile game business, most recently I went down to Charlotte and I built the NASCAR game business. And so NASCAR Heat is now, the NASCAR Heat 5 was just brought into the marketplace. And I'm proud of that from a point of view that I took a struggling sport and, found a business that really works for them. And continuing on, the legacy continues. And then from that point, I then went on and I was a board member of Connects and then was asked to come in as the chief operating officer of Connects. And I shaped the company up and was able to sell it to Basic Fun, which was another, successful initiative that I had recently. And then, and then right now, I'm spending a lot of time and I'm looking for innovation. So I'm looking for people that, have innovation, have an ability to deliver against that innovation. And I want to work with them to be able to find brands where we can bring this type of product to the marketplace.
And I've got to ask, because people might be listening to this later on, but we are in the middle of the COVID situation. Have you seen anybody or any adjustments or any opportunities as far as gaming is concerned, especially electronic gaming, given the current situation where people being stuck at home and not being able to go out, that there might be some product that normally wouldn't be as profitable or as successful that it should be brought to market now?
I think that during the coronavirus, all games are exploding. So, whether it's board games from Hasbro or, Game Show Network games, or it's, Nintendo or, Sony PlayStation games, they're all exploding right now. For me personally, I find that I'm playing a lot more mobile games. It's just something that for some reason I'm just hitting on that right now. And so I've played probably 30 or 40 mobile games in the last 3 or 4 months, which is a pretty heavy load for me. But I find that there's a really good experience in those games, and so I'm really enjoying that. And then probably the 2 biggest adjustments from a business point of view is that businesses hesitated because of the fact that the coronavirus was unknown. Now they're beginning to say we have to get back to doing some business, and you have to be really good on Zoom if you're going to be in the game business right now, because everything is Zoom type meetings.
Oh, you mean from a business standpoint, not from a game development, not from the game experience, but from the ability to pitch and do meetings.
Right. I mean, it used to be that I'd be on the road probably 9 out of the 12 months. I haven't been on the road since February, but I've had a lot of meetings, and they're just, they're either Skype or they're Messenger or they're Zoom. And, you just kind of have that state of mind that that's the way you're going to do business. And you have to adjust your business to be able to be effectively communicating through a Zoom or a Skype type of an experience.
And I guess I have to also ask, because we're seeing a slew of bankruptcies, or at least bankruptcies on the horizon in the retail space. Do you think that this is going to be a permanent shift in the way that product is brought to market? And what effect will that have for purely digital versus hybrid or physical products?
Yeah, I think that this feels a lot to me like the 80s and 90s, and there was this massive consolidation going on, and I see that in consumer products and in toys in particular, where it's becoming like a Amazon state of mind, and so that's how your product is sold. But now, if you think about Walmart, you think, well, you're going to go to the store. Well, Walmart is really Walmart.com. And so to me, what you're really seeing is that if you don't have a good online type strategy and a good online type partner, you're not going to be a success in this business.
Gotcha. Do you have any final words of wisdom to anybody who would like to get into this industry? Hopefully my legacy will be, it's all about the fun. And to me, I've been in this industry for a long, long time. I still love it. It's still fresh and exciting every single day. And my experience is that
with everything that's ever been successful, it comes down to one thing, and that is it's all about the fun. So focus on that, deliver that, and that's what will give you the success that you're looking for.
Excellent. Tom, I can't thank you enough for your time.
Well, thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed another Video Game Newsroom Time Machine interview. You can leave us comments on Twitter, Instagram, and if you like what we're doing here, drop us a couple of bucks on Patreon. All the links are in the description below.